All right, good afternoon, students. I am coming to you live from Austin, Texas. This is my brother's home. We evacuated here with 12 dogs and 4 cats, so we are a little bit on the crazy side. We already know that. So I'm going to do chapters 5 and 6 of I Survived Hurricane Katrina 2005. If we're watching the news, for Hurricane Laura, the one that's going to hit us, you will probably have heard Hurricane Katrina many times by now. We have for sure. Alrighty, so let me try and remember exactly what happened. So both boys realize that they're going to be evacuating. Barry is going to Houston with where his mom's family is, and they're kind of a headache for him. It's a lot of little girls, and they are probably just annoying to get on his nerves. And his friend Jay was going to Atlanta. They both wanted to meld off the comic book character that they had drawn and made Akivo, but Jay ended up winning, and he's going to meld off Akivo. They had some little pinky thing that Akivo gets some source of his power from, so that was one of the things that happens. And Barry was very surprised that his father was taking Hurricane Katrina so seriously, because they had had threats of these kind of storms in the past, and none had ever come to fruition very badly, so they had never evacuated before. And so that's where we're at right now. So we're on Chapter 5. Hurricane Katrina is now a Category 5 storm, folks, said the man on the radio. That's the strongest there is. Winds 175 miles an hour. Waves will be 20 feet high. It's aiming right for our beautiful city. Right for us. And honestly, those numbers sound kind of familiar. I've heard 175 mile per hour winds for Hurricane Laura, and waves, the storm surge is going to be insane. So for all our cities on the coast, it's going to be kind of crazy. We hope it won't be the epic proportion crazy that Hurricane Katrina was, but it's not looking very good. Right for us. This is a storm we've been fearing. It's time to leave. Time to get... Mom switched off the radio. Okay, she said softly. I heard you. We're leaving. Who are you talking to, Mom? Barry asked. She looked surprised to see him. Sorry, baby, she said, turning and kissing Barry on the cheek. That man is getting on my nerves. She had 3 coolers arranged on the floor and was filling them with food for their car trip. Are you worried? Barry asked, brushing some flour from Mom's sleeve. She'd been baking all morning. Not at all, she said, but Barry could see she was fibbing. Mom always baked when she got nervous, and she'd packed enough muffins and cookies in those coolers to feed the saints. We're almost ready, right? She asked. Barry nodded. He'd helped Dad board up the windows. He'd carried the porch furniture and Cleo's princess house into the shed. Need anything else? Find your sister, Mom said. She hasn't been herself all morning. I need you to work some berry magic on her. Barry found his sister crying in her bed. What is it, Clee? He asked. My princess house, she wailed. That lady took it. What lady? Katrina. Barry tried not to smile. In that 3-year-old brain of Cleo's, Katrina was probably a big fat vampire lady flying through the air. Your princess house is safe in the shed, Barry said. And Katrina isn't a lady. It's just a bunch of clouds. We're not afraid of clouds, are we? Cleo looked at Barry with her huge, teary eyes. Barry always got a soft feeling in his heart, like the purring of a little cat when he looked at his sister. Good thing he wasn't a superhero. One look at a crying Cleo and all his powers would be drained away. Which that would be called she would be his what? His kryptonite. So the one thing that makes him no longer strong as a superhero. I think that his love for his little sister probably does make him a very strong person. We're having an adventure, Barry said. You can't cry on an adventure. Cleo gave a big sniff. Will Akivo be there? She asked. Of course Cleo knew all about Akivo. For weeks, anytime Barry told Cleo a bedtime story, he made Akivo the star. Who rescued Snow White from the evil stepmother? Akivo. Who saved the 3 little pigs from the big bad wolf? Akivo. Now Barry put his face closer to his sister's. I think Akiva will be waiting for us in Houston tonight, he said. He hated tricking Cleo, but it wasn't really a lie. Akiva was always appearing in Barry's dreams. Maybe Cleo would dream about him too. To protect us? That's right, Barry said. He will protect us. Cleo gave another big, messy sniff and then nodded bravely. I won't cry, she whispered. She held out her arm so Barry could pick her up. He pulled her close. She put her head on his shoulder and let him carry her to the car. 10 minutes later, they were on the road. So that's the end of chapter 5. So what we can tell right now about Barry are a few things. The main thing is that he is very family-oriented. He loves his sister. He's only 11. Y'all are only 11. Do any of you have a sister that young? Are you that sweet to her, or a brother or a little brother? And so Barry has this super soft place in his heart for his little sister. I bet you what was said about his father, that about his heart, that he obviously had a really good heart. I bet Barry probably inherited that heart and that caring nature from his father, and he's passing it on to his little sister. It reminds me of me and my little sister. I was 16 when she was born, and she was kind of like my little baby, and she was like my child. Since I never had children, I always claim her as my own, and she just graduated high school last year. All right, so moving on to chapter 6. As always, it's just the same little picture. They sped through the lower 9 and crossed a St. Claude Avenue bridge. They drove past the bakery where Mom had worked before Cleo was born. She had learned how to make Barry's favorite caramel cake there. Mom's dream was to open her own bakery. They didn't have the money for that now. But one day, Mom always said, one day. She said those words so often they had become the Tucker family motto. One day Barry's dad would have a deal with a record label. One day they'd get rid of their dented old Honda and buy a nice new car. Maybe even one day Barry wouldn't be so scared of Abe McKay and his friends. And remember, Abe is that scary, tough guy that used to teach him how to play basketball, but then he went through some hardships, and now he's become kind of a tough guy. And he had the dog named Cruz, who he says will kill if he tells the dog to. One day. They drove a few more blocks, and then Dad pulled up in front of Lightning's, the club where he and his band played most Thursday nights. The owner, Dave Rivet, was one of Dad's closest friends. Barry had known him since before he could walk. Well, why are we stopping? Barry asked. Dad wants to make sure Uncle Dave is leaving, Mom said. Uncle Dave had spotted their car through the window. He came outside and hustled over to them, his big belly shaking. Uncle Dave had a smile that made you feel like he'd been waiting his whole life to see you. Dad stuck his arm out the window. Uncle Dave shook Dad's hand and blew a kiss to Mom. He peered into the back seat. Hey there, Barry. Hello there, Princess, he boomed, his words stretched out by his thick drawl. Grab your bag, Dad said. We'll make room for you. Uncle Dave peered at the little space between Barry and Cleo and laughed. You gonna tie me to the roof? He asked. But Dad's expression was serious. They're telling everyone to leave, he said. That means you too. Someone needs to keep an eye on our city, Uncle Dave said. I'm keeping the club open so folks have a place to go. I don't like it, Dad said. This place will be fine, Uncle Dave said, and so will I. Barry could tell that Uncle Dave wasn't changing his mind. So we have a new character introduced. Uncle Dave, someone that works with Barry's dad and they're best friends, and he is not going to evacuate because he thinks that everything will be fine. And we know a lot of people that way right now that are not evacuating. Hopefully they'll fare better than a lot of the people from Hurricane Katrina did. We can only hope for that. Dad grabbed Uncle Dave's hand again. You take care, Dad said. If you change your mind, I'm right here, Uncle Dave said. I already told some folks, don't go to the Superdome, just come to Lightning's. I have my generator and about 1 million hot dogs. So the Superdome was a place that people who couldn't leave the city could go and stay and maybe, be protected. And so Uncle Dave is also offering his bar as a place for people to go and stay. We'll keep that in mind, Dad said. Uncle Dave put his hands on Dad's shoulders. And I better see you this Thursday for the show. Dad laughed and started up the engine. Let's hope. Isn't it a bad idea for him to stay? Barry asked once they'd driven away. This neighborhood doesn't usually get flooded, Dad said. It's a bit higher than the rest of the city. And let's face it, if anyone can keep a hurricane away, it's Dave, Mom said. They sped toward Interstate 10, but the closer they got, the heavier the traffic became. Soon their car was standing still. Barry opened his window and stuck his head out. The line of cars and trucks stretched as far as he could see. The hot and sticky air stunk of car exhaust. So right now they are stuck in traffic, and it's pretty bad. So what can we infer became the problem? And infer is when you take clues from the story and you make a guess about what might happen in the future. And since we already kind of know what happened in the future, it's not quite an inference, but now we know a little bit more information. So they were on their evacuation route, and then standstill traffic happened. So we're going to pause for a second. Back in 2005, I evacuated when I was 19 years old with my mom, and she had a stroke, which was really weird. She was pretty young and had a stroke, and I had to drive. And it took us to get from Nederland to Parkdale Mall, which is about a 15-minute drive normally. It took us 8 hours. So that's the kind of traffic we're talking about here. Okay, so we can infer that the traffic caused the problem, and that's probably why they ended up getting stuck in New Orleans, and that's probably why Barry was in the floodwaters and not able to find his family. Dad clicked on the radio and punched the buttons until he found a traffic report. The news was terrible. Cars were backed up for hundreds of miles on roads leading out of the city. That's the problem when everybody has to evacuate. Everybody floods the roads, and you can't go anywhere. This will take all day, Mom said softly, reaching into the cooler and taking out a blueberry muffin. Dad patted her leg. Cleo fussed, and Barry tried to distract her with one of his stories. An hour went by, and the car didn't budge. 1 hour. So 1 whole hour, and they never moved. Dad had to turn off the air conditioner so the engine wouldn't overheat. Cleo whined and moaned and finally fell asleep. Here's a picture. So Barry, and it's showing all the cars. Another hour passed. They'd moved just a few feet. So now that's 2 hours, and they've probably moved like max 10 feet. So a little bit farther than we are tall. Barry's shirt was soaked with sweat. At this rate, it would be hours before they even got onto the highway. And then they had more than 300 miles to drive. What if they were stuck in traffic when the storm hit? Before Barry could ask that scary question, Cleo woke up and started to wail. And then, as Barry was reaching for her favorite stuffed poodle, a wave of warm soup splashed across his lap. What in the... Except it wasn't soup. Cleo had thrown up. She threw up again, this time into the front seat, and again onto the floor. There was a moment of shocked silence, and then Cleo burst into tears. "Wah!" she wailed. The awful smell rose in the car. Barry put his hands over his face, which made Cleo scream more. Mom unhooked her seatbelt and scrambled into the back seat. Dad rummaged in the glove compartment and found a wad of napkins. Mom started to wipe off Cleo's face. "This little girl is burning up," Mom said. Barry reached over to feel Cleo's forehead. She was boiling. "What's wrong?" Barry asked, his heart racing. "I'm sure she just has a bug," Dad said. "She'll be all right." Mom gave Cleo a sip of water. "It's okay, baby," she said. "Just try to settle down. You'll feel better soon." But Cleo threw up again, and again. She screamed so loudly people in the other lanes peered out their car windows. Mom and Dad looked at each other, and Barry understood exactly what they were thinking. There was no way that they could get on the highway with Cleo that sick. Sure enough, Dad pulled out of the line of traffic and pointed the car back toward home. And so that's one of the reasons, that's the end of that chapter, that when we do inferencing, it's considered you take the information you know and you guess. And so I took the information I knew, and I guessed that they got stuck on the highway, and then the storm hit, and that's how they ended up being in the floodwaters. And I was wrong. So what happened was his little sister got sick, very sick, and they couldn't stay in that line of traffic. They had to turn around and go back home. So we'll see what happens after that, and I'll post a video tomorrow. I have no idea if anybody listens to these or watches these, but, it's okay. It gets me through the day, gives me something to look forward to, and I hope you're all staying very safe.